I'd like to call the September 11th Davie County School Board meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. I have a motion by Mr. Fuller. Do I have a second? I have a second by Ms. Owens. All in favor? Motion carries unanimously. The next item on the agenda is to go into closed session. I need a motion to enter in the closed session to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to the North Carolina general statutes listed on our agenda, to discuss personnel matters protected by state law, and to discuss student matters made confidential by general statutes and FERPA. I'm waving at you. Sorry. I have a motion by Ms. Horn, second by Mr. Drexler. All in favor? We are now in closed session. I hate to break up the chatter, Dina. No. But I'd like to reconvene and welcome everyone to our September 11th school board meeting. First item on the agenda is our invocation. Loving and gracious God, you are indeed the giver of all good gifts, and we thank you today for all your blessings, for the successful outcomes of our school events, and for all our staff members. We ask that you bless them abundantly, and we continue to seek your wisdom, guidance, courage, and strength. Be with us in our deliberations and help us to be wise in the decisions we make for the good of all those who have placed their trust and confidence in us. Give us insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good. Keep us from short-sightedness and pettiness. Help us to make decisions that are good for all, and guard us from blind self-interest. Dear Lord, grant us the humility to always seek your will in all that we do and say. Amen. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance, led by Girl Scout Troop 2150.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from August 7th. I have a motion by Mr. Drexler. I have a second by Mr. Fuller. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the important dates. I'll point out a few. September 19th, we will be hosting the North Carolina School Board Association District 5 meeting at 4 p.m. At the Davie County High School. So it's exciting to have them there. September 20th, we have the Board of Education lunch at Moxville Elementary School, and then jumping into October. Commissioners meeting on Monday, October the 1st, and our meeting back in here, October 2nd.
I would suggest the registration will probably begin around 3:30, but we'll send you an update before next week.
Next item on the agenda is the superintendent's report, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Hartness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. I'll start out by saying that we've had an extremely smooth opening to the school year, and I need to find some wood to knock on, but it has been a fantastic beginning of the school year. 17 years ago today, I think we can all remember where we were and what we were doing. There were 2,977 people who lost their life that day in Pennsylvania, in Washington, D.C., and in New York City. And I would ask that if you would, please join me in a moment of silence to remember them and their families. Thank you. It's on a day like today that we try not to take for granted anything. So thank you for joining me there. We have a longer than usual agenda tonight. We have a lot of updates to provide for you, but I had a couple things to share with you. First thing, we've been looking at ways that we can continue to increase support for our students and address identified needs across the district. So we have been reaching out to outside partners and looking for other opportunities to provide those resources. Over the past several months, we've applied for 3 school safety grants through the state of North Carolina, and we've been notified about 2 of those so far. Last month, I shared with you that we received one of the grants that will provide 2 additional school resource officers for our schools. We've worked with the sheriff and with our commissioners to get those rolling, and those new positions are scheduled to begin on October the 1st. You have a memorandum of understanding on your agenda tonight for approval to put those folks in place. We've also notified that the school safety grant we submitted for an additional social worker was approved. We've hired that person, and that person's in place. So those 2 grants we've been notified. We have another school safety grant in the pipeline, and this grant required an outside nonprofit partner. And for this grant, the Dragonfly House is partnering with us, and if we receive these funds, it will help us with training to accelerate our compassionate and resilient schools initiatives in our schools, provide much-needed training for our staff and our teachers. Outside of the school safety grants through the state that came through the public schools and the state superintendent's office, the Dragonfly House submitted another grant over the last several months through the Governor's Crime Commission, and we're happy to tell you that we have received funding with the Dragonfly House for 2 full-time mental health therapists to work in our schools. So those 2 folks will be working in 4 of our schools full-time, and they'll be working with children who've had at least one adverse childhood experience and exhibited at least 2 behaviors associated with that trauma that they've experienced. So we're very thankful for the time and support that we're receiving with our community partners, and especially the Dragonfly House and the many ways they serve our students. So to summarize, I just shared with you 5 positions that support our schools, 5 positions using outside resources. We feel pretty good about those positions being funded over the next 2 years, and we have no obligations beyond that for those positions. But I don't want to thank all the staff involved, the time and energy that went into writing those grants, and the reporting that will go along with that. But it's given much needed support to our schools. So that's good news for Davie County Schools. As Mr. Junker mentioned, Region 5 North Carolina School Board Association meeting will be next Wednesday at Davie County High School. We'll have approximately 100 school board members from around the region who will be coming to that event. Ms. Horn, our vice chair, will be our host that evening, and she'll provide the welcome on behalf of the board and help with the logistics of that. I want to thank Elle King and all of our staff who have been part of organizing that event and showcasing Davie County Schools, Davie County High School. I want to thank Mr. Nicholson, the staff, and the students who will be involved in that event next Wednesday. As a host district, we usually have a presentation that we provide, and our presentation this time will be meeting with the principal and hearing about Davie High School, and our students will be providing tours of the school, which we consider to be a model high school in North Carolina. So I hope each of you will have an opportunity to participate in that event. Elle just told me that Region 3 and 4 meetings this week have been canceled, so we may have some folks coming to District 5 for this meeting that missed those others. So we're going to continue to monitor the weather situation. I know that's on everyone's mind right now. We've been in contact with our local emergency management officials. We're receiving regular updates from them. And we have a community emergency response meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. We're going to make decisions about school the rest of the week sometime tomorrow. We're going to always keep the safety of our students and our staff first, and just as we do when we have winter inclement weather. Any changes to school schedules will be communicated the same way that we do in the wintertime, through our website, through our social media sites, and through our use of School Messenger, our calling system. So we encourage all of our staff and citizens to prepare for these storms. We're anticipating lots of rain, outages. We want everyone to prepare themselves and their homes and their family according to the guidance that we get from emergency management officials. And we would also encourage folks to regularly check our website and our social media for any schedule changes for other events associated with the schools. We made some changes today with athletic events. One of those is the Carson football game that's scheduled Friday night is now rescheduled for 7:30 tomorrow night, Wednesday night at Davie County High School. So we'll just have to keep an eye on those things for the rest of the week, and I wish everyone a safe rest of the week, and we pray that our community would be spared from this storm. Mr. Chairman, that's my update tonight.
Great, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the recognitions, and the first is Governor's School, and that's Ms. Jenda Haynes.
Thank you, Chairman Junker, board members, Dr. Hartness, guest. Governor's School is a highly competitive 5.5-week summer residential program for gifted students. It is the oldest statewide summer residential program, and we have both Governor's West and Governor's East at Salem and Meredith, respectively. These programs integrate the arts, the academic disciplines, as well as unique courses, particularly recent topics. So it's an amazing opportunity for our students. And we had 3 students who were selected that we want to honor and recognize tonight. And so I'd like to ask Doyle Nicholson, principal from Davie High School, and Denise Absher, principal at Early College High School, to come up and help with some certificates for me. Had Sierra Foster. I think Sierra is at a tennis match tonight. But Sierra is a senior at Davie High School this year. She participated in Governor's School East in natural science, and she is the daughter of Alan and Marjorie Foster of Moxville. Also from Davie High School, a junior this year, Olivia Jones. Is Olivia with us? You not? Olivia is again a junior. She participated in Governor's School East in the choral program, and her parents are Matt and Natasha Jones of Moxville. And then third, we had China Moore. China is a senior at Davie County Early College High School. Please come on forward. China participated. She participated in Governor's School East in the theater program, which I think is particularly interesting considering that the early college doesn't have a fine arts program the way that Davie High School does, so that's quite impressive. And her parents are Ray and Vicki Moore. They are of Moxville, so congratulations to you all. Thank you for representing us well, and congratulations.
Congratulations. Next recognition is the North Carolina Soil and Water Conservation Speech Contest, and presenter is Chelsea Rutledge.
All right. Good evening, Chairman Junker, members of the board, Dr. Hartness, and guests. As a former participant and environmental science teacher, I hold the mission of the soil and water conservation near and dear to my heart. Today, it is my pleasure to recognize a young lady who in her 8th grade year last year with us at South Davie won not only at the local levels, but at the state level for her soil and water conservation speech. So it is my honor to recognize Lauren Warlick for her outstanding achievements in the North Carolina Soil and Water Conservation Program with her essay on the 2017-2018 topic, Water, the Cycle of Life. Lauren. Hey, Lauren. We are very proud of her accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations again. Next item on our agenda is a consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve? I have a motion by Ms. Owens. Do I have a second? I have a second by Colonel Hills. Any discussion?
Chairman Junker, just a reminder on the agenda, consent agenda, that you are approving the addendum that's been placed at your seat. Got it?
Any questions? All in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Next, moving on to business items, and first item is the transportation contract. Jeff Wallace.
Thank you, Chairman Junker. Board, in August, you approved transportation contract with Wavetti, which was presented to us, the contract and the agreement by Wavetti at that time. Shortly after you approved that, in late August, early September, Wavetti contacted us to share with us that they needed to adjust, or actually, they wanted to nullify that contract because of their price restructuring. So we've met with them a couple of times to take a look at the situation, and so we asked them to honor the contract that you approved in August, and they politely said, we will for 30 days, as is written in the contract, and we will propose another contract, which is before you tonight in the board packet. And it is an increase of cost, and I will tell you that since that time, we've had some positive meetings with the Wavetti staff, but we've also reached out to other providers. So we are looking at other providers. We are looking at what we can do to provide our students that need some additional or special transportation. But at this time, that's the only feasible means of transportation. But we will continue to look into that as we're moving forward. And I'll be glad to address any questions if there are any.
I have a question. What would be the increased cost in round figures, numbers?
Approximately, where they went from $1.85 a mile
Right,
to $2.02 a mile.
okay.
So approximately, Deborah, if I recall, about 40,000.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Now, that's assuming, last year we drove 163,000 miles. And our route should be very similar this year. So we're projecting right at the overall increase for the travel at approximately $40,000.
Mr. Wallace, this new contract, is it also for both parties concerned, a 30-day, every 30 days can be renewed or notice given? So as
Yeah.
you research, we're not locked in.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Drexler. Good question. We do have the option to nullify the contract ourselves after 30 days. And it's also clearly written in there that we can look for other providers as well to meet the needs that we have for our children. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Call for a vote or motion? Sorry. Motion to approve by Mr. Drexler. Have a second? Have a second by Mr. Fuller. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Mr. Wallace, I'll turn over the next with the
Okay.
monitoring services with Wavetti as well.
Yes, sir. Monitoring services, of course, what it says is to provide a monitor for, in particular routes where that's necessitated by the child's needs. Last year, we had a contract not to exceed 45,000. This year, there is increased to not to exceed 65. So you asked me a question, Mr. Hales, about the increased cost. So this would be on top of the 40,000.
Yeah.
Which I knew we were getting this next. That's why I didn't include it in my first statement.
Good.
But it is not to exceed 65,000. And I will tell you that we're, again, working closely with Wavetti and our DC staff and Transportation Department to provide what we have to take care of our children, but to be as efficient as possible.
Any questions? Entertain a motion. Motion with from Ms. Owens.
Second.
Colonel Hills. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Next item is the agenda, easement at the high school. I'll turn it over to Dr. Hartness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attached is an easement related to the remaining property the Board of Education owns at 1200 Salisbury Road. This is the former high school site. As you recall, we did a property transfer back in the spring. There were several easements in that property transfer. All of our easements were covered, but the county needs an easement to access the park property from the bus parking lot side of that property, which we own. And this easement just details giving them access to, for entrance and egress through that bus parking lot. So it's just a technicality that was left out on their end when we were negotiating the property transfer. staff would recommend approval.
Any questions? Motion? Motion to approve, Colonel Hills, second. Mr. Drexler? Any other questions? All in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Turn it back over to you for the SRO agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attached is an agreement that was drafted in conjunction with the sheriff to provide 2 additional SROs. This agreement actually outlines all of our school resource officers and how those are paid for. So the staff would ask that you authorize us to enter into this agreement with the sheriff's office.
Any questions? I will say, on behalf of the school system, and everyone knows this, but I just wanted to say it, we are very fortunate to have a relationship that we have with the Sheriff's Department. Incredible deputies that work with the kids and are there, and just, it's great. Very fortunate.
It's also fortunate this idea of adding resource officers came out of the task force, and shows when people come together what great things can happen. I really do appreciate that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Entertain a motion. Motion by Ms. Owens, second by Mr. Drexler. Questions? All in favor? Motion carries 6-0.
Mr. Junker, if I could add, echo your comments. Our partnership with the Davie County Sheriff's Office and law enforcement and emergency personnel in Davie County is something that we value. And in looking for 2 deputies to serve in these roles, it takes a unique individual to work in a school each day. And I want to thank the sheriff for selecting individuals that are experienced. These are folks that are not just starting their career in law enforcement. They've proven themselves and are valued and trusted by the sheriff to work with our students, and he feels like they will be a good fit with working in our schools. So we appreciate his consideration and selection of the people who work in our schools.
Absolutely. Ms. Wilson, public address to the board.
Board members, you will have no one addressing you today, but I know you have a full agenda and plenty of other exciting things to do.
Thank you. Committee staff reports, academic services, and that is Ms. Lynn.
Okay. All right. Good evening, Chairman Junker, Dr. Hartness, board members, and guests. I want to share with you the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, 2017-18 assessment results for both reading and math. First, let me start with math and explain that the summative math assessments are aligned with the state math standards. However, there are some differences in the format of the assessment and how they are administered at each grade. In kindergarten, teachers administer this assessment to individual students on a one-on-one basis, and those tasks are one-step problems. In first grade, teachers administer this assessment both one-on-one and small or whole group. They begin to build some independence in their test taking, and some tasks include more than one problem or equation. In second grade, teachers administer this assessment in small group or whole group, and that's where they're really building those independence and test-taking skills. And the task often includes more than one multi-step problems. If you take a look at our K-2 math summative assessment data, here you can see that we remain strong over the last 3 years. Very little difference in proficiency results in 2018, with kindergarten at 92%, first grade at 88%, and second grade at 83%. Our K-2 reading end-of-year assessment is referred to, you may have heard this term, the TRC M-class assessment. It's required by the state. This assessment is administered to individual students one-on-one. The skills that are assessed are phonics, fluency, accuracy, retail, as well as oral and written comprehension skills.
Back in 2015-16, the state made procedural changes to this assessment, and it was became much more standardized. The end-of-year assessment can no longer be given by the classroom teacher, but had to be given by a certified teacher, instead another person in the building. We were given new higher-level written comprehension questions that were mandated, and these questions typically begin for most students in first grade. If you look at a 4-year comparison of our assessment results, you can see in the first highlighted column, this is where those procedural changes took place from the state, and we had high-level written comprehension questions beginning for most students again in first grade. You can see by looking in 17-18, 2 years later, we've made progress at each grade. With 76% in kindergarten, which continues to climb each year, 56% in first grade, which is an 8-point gain over the last 2 years, and 60% in second grade, which shows an awesome 16 points gain in the last 2 years. We do have new assessment kits this year, and we have new testing procedures that are provided to us by the state. We have new books with higher text complexity. We have higher level questions, but those are oral questions. And one thing that's changed that I want to mention is we no longer have the written comprehension questions that we've had in the past. We're unsure how this will affect our data at this point, but teachers are in the middle of their beginning of the year assessments right now. Any questions?
Okay. Can you repeat that last statement in reference to the changes?
Mhm, yes.
Because I want to make sure I understand those.
So this year, we have new assessment kits that were given to us. They used to be called Rigby, and now they're called Atlas kits. So we have all new books that they're being assessed with. These books are a higher text complexity than the ones we've had before. Higher. Mhm. We do have higher level questioning as well, but now it's all oral questions. We've had oral questioning in the past, but we no longer have the written piece, the written comprehension questions, which if you think about that, it really is testing their reading ability and oral comprehension, not their writing ability now. So we're interested to see how that affects our data.
Can you go backwards with the slides, I think, to the last chart that you had up there? Yes. Second grade reading proficiency results, 4-year comparison. Second graders, last year 60%.
Yes.
It's an improvement of 16% over the previous year, or the
2 years.
2 years, the yellow. Explain in a way that I will feel much better about the 40%.
Yes. The 44%?
No. 60% is proficiency.
40% not being proficient. Sure. This assessment is an assessment that is not created by our state. It's created by a company called Amplify, and it's purchased by our state and mandated by our state. It's an assessment that last year, students had to not only be able to read at a high level, and we believe our students read at a high level, they had to write the answers to their questions. And it's an assessment that students may have the reading ability, but they may not be able to write their answers to the comprehension questions at a high level. And so we've all been concerned about, does this assessment really assess their reading ability, or is it assessing their writing ability? And now, thankfully, the state has heard that, and beginning this year, it is truly going to start assessing their reading ability.
Mr. Drexler, I would address your very good question there. Should we be proud that only 60% of our students are proficient in second grade? And I would take the board back to the conversation we had when I was sharing the strategic plan. in the early 2000s, almost 90% of our students in grades 3 through 8 were proficient in reading. I would just remind the board that this is one of those other measures, and it depends on the measure you're using and the cut scores that you establish as to what percent proficiency that you're going to have. I am not convinced that in the early 2000s, our third graders and second graders were much more intelligent than the students in our schools today. They were just measured with different tools. So when we set our standards really high, we're not going to have the same proficiency levels that we've had in the past. And that's a tough one to explain, but we've set very high standards in North Carolina, and that's why we have the proficiency rates we do.
For those that are concerned, this is to both of you, either one, take a throwback at me. There is some data that compares are you just as bad as the rest of the state? That's not what I'm trying to say. How do I say that the other way? How do I say this, Deb? Help.
Compared
How
to
do
the
we
state?
compare to the state?
Yeah, this is an assessment that they do not report that. This is an assessment that we receive that data, but they do not compare us to the state. It's supposed to be a formative assessment, which is supposed to inform instruction along the way.
Is it a fair statement to say that the group of second graders who scored at 60% proficient are the same group that scored at 51% proficient last year?
That's correct.
Which shows that there is nice steady
Yes.
growth.
And in just a little while, we're going to show you the Davy Leads data, and you're going to see those cohorts being
Okay.
tracked. That's correct. Other questions?
But Mr. Potts, I would also point, your analysis there of 51%, that cohort moved from 51% to 60. As kindergartners, they were 70% proficient, but there was no written component to it in kindergarten. So it was a much different assessment starting in first grade.
When we first started this assessment years ago, it was truly a assessment of a reading ability. They changed it to an assessment that included the writing piece, and that changed the whole data, the system on us.
Any other questions about that in particular? Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the Read to Achieve Summer Camp update.
Chairman Junker, Board, Dr. Hartness, and guests, we're going to stay on this academic track and look at some of our data from Read to Achieve Camp this summer. Again, we had a wonderful summer camp. We'll share several pictures as we go through, and I'm going to let Jen run the slides as we go here. First of all, just with an overview, this was, believe it or not, our 6th annual Read to Achieve summer camp. We had a total of 121 students, a few less than last year, and that included first, second, and third graders. So we had 76 third graders, 72 were actually required to attend camp, and 4 were invited with good cause. We had 25 second graders and 20 first graders, so again, 121 total. Like in the past, we held this camp at the Moxville Elementary School, which is conveniently located next to the YMCA, one of our partners in this camp. There were 16 days, held June 25th through July 19th. And along with the YMCA and the Public Library, the Mebane Charitable Foundation is a critical partner in this work. So to begin with, just to talk a little bit about the planning and the preparation, we are really fortunate that we're able to combine state funds that we receive for the Read to Achieve Camp along with Mebane dollars as part of the Davy Leads grant. And that really allows us to employ high-quality staff, really develop teacher capacity through ongoing professional development, particularly A+ strategies, and provide supplies and materials for the camp. Again, we provide at least one day of training in A+ strategies each year to kick off that camp. That's really a time for the staff to come together and unite and become a summer staff together. It builds collegiality, some common experiences, and it's really an inspirational time. So you'll see some pictures on this slide during the training here at CDEC. Because we're talking about 121 students, this really is much like running a school. And so there's a lot of coordination involved, including bus transportation, child nutrition, help from our school nurses, lots of folks involved in planning and coordinating this camp. We especially want to thank Jeremy Brooks and Christy Kernatzer. Jeremy served as our camp director again this year, and Christy Kernatzer moved from being a Read to Achieve teacher in the past to being our curriculum coordinator for camp this year. Again, the YMCA is a critical partner. They provide physical activity and allow the teachers to have some planning time. They provide a water day. You'll see some pictures at the end of these slides. Some special activities provided by the Knoxville Public Library, and of course, we have to include accountability. Erin and her team helps us with some assessments and retesting third graders at the end. As far as approach and methods, I've already mentioned this a little bit, and Jim will expand upon it. We do integrate the arts, but it's for the purpose of literacy. Small group reading instruction with, again, highly qualified staff, and we also incorporate the intensive hill rap reading intervention. And I'll let Jen talk a little more about the arts integration and some of the other aspects.
So this year, we adjusted our schedule to increase instructional time for first and second grade. We focused on what are called informances throughout the camp. We used to have a culminating performance at the end called a powwow. This year, we really focused on having what are called informances, which they could showcase the literacy that they were learning through the arts, more than just that culminating performance at the end. This was something that the students really enjoyed, and of course, they really enjoyed the arts. I want to look also at the results for the third graders. Our third grade campers, there were 72 third grade students who had not demonstrated proficiency and were required to attend the camp. In addition, we had 4 third graders who had what we call a good cause exemption from state proficiency requirements who were invited. Therefore, we had a total of 76 third graders who benefited from participating. A wonderful 85% of those 72 required demonstrated growth either on the iReady assessment, the M-Class assessment, or on the Read to Achieve state assessment. That compares to 81% last year. So we had 85% this year compared to 81% last year. Of the 72 required third graders, we had 23, which is 32% or almost 1 out of 3, who demonstrated proficiency and earned a clear promotion to 4th grade. That compares to 24% last year or 1 in 4 last year. The remaining third grade campers will move on to 4th grade. They'll move on as what we call a 4RR, retained in reading. These students will receive additional reading support to help ensure acceleration, and they'll have multiple opportunities to demonstrate proficiency throughout the school year. That'll include retaking another Read to Achieve test in October here in 4th grade.
It may not sound significant, but I just have to say, when you move from 1 out of 4 to 1 out of 3 making proficiency in 16 days, that's pretty powerful.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And a lot of that had to do with building confidence.
Yep.
Building confidence. Our second graders, who are among our youngest campers, also demonstrated remarkable growth. Their fluency was assessed before and at the end of camp through the M-Class assessment, the one we were just talking about. Last year, we had 29 second graders, and 21 or 72% demonstrated growth in fluency. This summer, we had 25 second graders, and 20 or 80% demonstrated growth in fluency, with a range from 1 to 38 points and an average growth of 9 points, which again is remarkable. Our first graders, last summer we had 21 first graders that showed 75% growth. This year we had 20 first graders who attended camp. 85% showed growth with a range of 1 to 29 points and an average growth of 10 points in fluency. And again, that was just in 16 days.
Okay, so this last table shows overall growth with all 3 grade levels. So as you can see, of the 121 students who attended, again, 117 were assessed through M-Class iReady and/or the Read to Achieve state test to track that growth. You'll see that the first and the third graders had the highest growth with 85%, and second grade, they are not far behind with 80%. Last year, 78% of 127 campers showed growth. So again, we have even stronger growth this year with a total of 84% students showing growth in 16 days. I want to draw your attention to the pictures at the bottom of this slide. These are some pictures that Mr. Marshall took on the last day as teachers were getting test scores back. And you can see the excitement. They put their heart and soul into building these students' confidence and using their expertise to build their reading skills as well. And so they are absolutely thrilled as they looked through those results. These were not made-up pictures. They almost look like they could be staged. They're not. They're real. On the very last day, as Jen already mentioned, we had an informance versus a performance. So the culminating celebration was really a time for students to show or to express some of what they had learned and how they had gained their confidence. And then the remainder of the day, the YMCA, our, again, critical partner in this work, provided a pizza lunch for them and had a water day in the afternoon. So kids really had a great time. And they left camp that day, some of them really sad to go home for it all to be over, but they left with their very own books to take home and read after camp. And of course, we cannot talk about the success of camp without acknowledging the staff. Again, outstanding educators in Davie County, tremendous expertise and dedication, so we want to say thanks to them.
And like they mentioned too, the partnerships too. Couldn't do it without them.
We are really fortunate.
I'll be honest with you, it's been, I always look forward to seeing this Read to Achieve Camp presentation because for the last 6 years, it's exciting to see kids that had struggles and see them, at least through these pictures, know that they're growing and achieving and feeling better about themselves, I'm sure. It's awesome. And the partnership with the community partners is a special thing. It is.
Chad's comment sounds like political rhetoric, but I'm telling you, I saw one kid that's very close to our family who left the end of the school year. He was really almost depressed. Went to this program, and we talked to him Friday night at the football game, and he was just so excited to be back, not to be back in school. First time he's ever been excited about being in school. So your words tonight were right on point with this kid. I don't know the rest of the kids that were there, but I can tell you that one, you made a difference, and I thank you.
Great.
And I will say, even teachers in Read to Achieve Camp oftentimes follow up with students, even who attend other schools during the fall, particularly as they approach the Read to Achieve retest in October. So even those connections, those relationships have an impact beyond.
The other thing I would say too is with this camp, you do the whole child. You have an opportunity for 16 days to be intense with reading, but you do the arts, you do the play, you do the things that children need to do. And from that, the growth really shows. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next item is the Davy Leeds, and Dr. Hartness, Jennifer Lind, and Peggy Knuckles.
Hey, Chairman Junker, board members, Dr. Hartness, and guests. Davy Leeds, as I think you already know, is a 5-year initiative. This is focused on early learning and literacy development. The 4 of us, including Dr. Hartness, will be presenting to the Mebane board next Tuesday morning, and we will provide an even more detailed report for them. But we're going to give you the overview today. So this is our practice run, and they will be much tougher on us than you all will be. I just have to say. This is a partnership, as we've already mentioned previously, an exceptional example of the power of a public-private partnership. We are, again, very blessed with the funding that we have with the Mebane Foundation. We're very early in this journey of the 5-year grant. We have just completed year 1, but we're going to, again, give you an update on where we are after 1 year of implementation. So I have to say that Peggy Knuckles and Jennifer Lind are the real visionaries and the leaders in this initiative, and I'm going to kick it to them to go ahead and remind you of the goals and provide you with some accomplishments and some data.
Our main goal is to basically just improve kindergarten readiness. Along with that is also the curriculum, the methods, the kindergarten readiness common language that we use. It's just building that consistency among all preschool programs, private and public. What we are doing and continuing to do over the 5 years is we're strengthening technology uses in the classroom so that they are interactive and relevant to curriculum and the assessments. We're building fidelity with the use of common curriculum and assessments, and we're building a common language and understanding around kindergarten readiness. We're also building data, and with that data, we are driving our instruction and teaching all of our preschool classrooms how to be driven by instruction and also have differentiation of instruction for our students. We have the use of mobile technology that we are starting this year. Our PLCs, we will continue differentiation. The Teaching Strategies Gold is our assessments, our Creative Curriculum 5, and then we will continue all of our professional development with those categories.
Our second goal with this initiative is to improve third grade reading proficiency from 60% to 80% by 2022. We want to do that by strengthening instructional practices, and that's through high-quality professional development. We want to build capacity in our instructional staff, and that's through ongoing coaching and modeling. We also want to update resources and materials, specifically in our media centers and our guided reading rooms. And we began this process this past year, and we want to continue this over the next 4 years.
I want to pause just a second there, Jen, if we can. If you'll go back to that slide. Since we've already been talking about data tonight, when you look at project goal number 2 and you look at improving reading proficiency from 60% to 80%, 60% doesn't sound good, and 80% still doesn't sound good. But I want to clarify that. As we were sitting down and beginning to create the goals for this initiative, to reach 80% would put us number 1 in the state of North Carolina. So understand that it's not that we want 20% of our students not proficient on reading, but we are already setting a really lofty goal.
If I'm reading this correct, that 60% that you just spoke of, it was the same 60% on that chart that we went back to earlier? Mm-hmm. Is that correct?
That the 60% was that we looked on the chart. That was our second graders at the end of the year.
Okay.
So it's very much, you can compare
In line
those
with that.
M class and end of grade.
This goal from 60 to 80% here, proficiency, that goal was made when you had reading and the writing component together, correct?
It was, but this is based on end of grade test.
For third grade.
for third grade.
Okay,
What I was presenting before was our kindergarten through second grade.
okay.
You will see third grade data as we continue.
Yes. Okay. Our five-year plan, our five-year summary, looking at kindergarten through third grade, literacy coach support. We were very fortunate to hire 2 literacy coaches to serve our elementary schools. Each literacy coach serves 3 elementary schools. We hired very high-quality, strong literacy coaches. Amy Spade and Renee Hennings-Gonzalez are doing a phenomenal job. We are very fortunate to have them. We have Letterland support. Now we have Letterland in pre-K through second grade, and having that consistency is incredible. We have Hill training going on each year. The principals are selecting teachers and teacher assistants to provide this. We are using the balanced literacy approach. We have curriculum mapping sessions. We have an opportunity for our teachers to have half-day planning sessions every quarter, which they find as very valuable time to plan out for the next quarter together as a group. We are updating our guided reading collections and updating our media center collections and enhancing our media centers along the way. We have yearly professional development focus areas. Last year, we really focused on strengthening our PLCs, which are our professional learning communities. That's when our grade levels get together and they really look at the standards and they do some really high-quality planning. We've been looking at differentiation and growth mindset. This year, our focus is guided reading, and we're really excited about that. Thank you. We really have had a great start with some professional development, and they'll get coaching along the way. Next year, we'll focus on writing instruction, and years 4 and 5, anytime you implement something, you have to continue to focus on everything you've started, or it will fall back. So we will continue to focus on those things years 4 and 5, and specifically with training new hires that come along the way.
One of our biggest fears as we began was building those relationships with private providers and coming up with resistance. But luckily, we found the right person, Stephanie Nelson, who is coaching in those facilities on a weekly and monthly basis. And she built a really good relationship. And so we are working and able to work with 13 participating private licensed and unlicensed centers. We are collaborating with Smart Start to align training. We have 4 collaborative PLCs with public and private teachers, and we are aligning documents that we can share with our parents and also documents that we are sharing with kindergarten teachers in order to create that common language. The biggest goal for last year was just to build that team-minded atmosphere between private and public as well. So far, last year, she was able to complete 113 coaching visits and trainings, 6 adult learning tours for preschool teachers and directors, 2 field trips for rising kindergartners, and we created a book that was a reading book for all students to take when they come to visit the elementary school that said, "What is an elementary school?" And it was about pictures that were of their environment, their new environment for the gym, the cafeteria, the playground. It was also pictures of possible staff that they would be meeting as they come. And it had language in it that they could read with their parents, and it was very user-friendly for the preschoolers. Our preschool data, we start with our dial screening. In 2016 and 17, we had 75% of rising kindergartners were screened. In 17-18, 83% of rising kindergartners were screened. We did add an additional screening in August to try to help catch our summer enrollment and those who could not attend the spring dial screening that we had. And so we increased the number of students that we screened. We also increased the number of students who were ready for kindergarten. 71% were ready in 2016-17, and in 17-18, the dial screening showed that 80% were ready to enter kindergarten with no at-risk factors. To kind of give you an overview of the people that we are working with, the agencies we're working with, there are technically 8 private licensed centers There are 7 public school licensed centers and 2 private licensed homes and 7 religious facilities. 5 of those private sites with 5 classrooms are NC Pre-K, North Carolina Pre-K classrooms, and there are 7 North Carolina Pre-K public school sites with 12 classrooms. Altogether, we are working with 18. That is 7 private licensed centers, and we're working with 6 religious facilities. The new data that has become because of this grant is that we are able to have gold assessment, which is a continuum assessment throughout the year. We do in fall, in the winter, and the spring. And this shows the growth of students and the readiness in the classroom as they enter into kindergarten. This was the first year that our private sites have used gold online. And so we are able to pull and see the bridges and the gaps that we need to pull together from the private sites to the public sites. And it helps us to align what we are doing with Davy Leeds.
We definitely have accomplishments to celebrate. This past year, we really spent a lot of time building capacity in our staff through professional development, coaching, and modeling. We really saw a big growth piece in our professional learning communities through really growing standards-focused PLCs. We invested time in our school-level leadership, so not only are our teachers receiving professional development, our school-level leadership, our administrators are receiving professional development as well along the way. We're adjusting to meet schools where they are. That's one very strong piece about this grant, is that we have the flexibility to we don't have to do the same thing for every school. We can meet schools where they are, and we can coach and model along the way and adjust to the needs of the schools. We're seeing incremental growth in MClass and EOG data already in our first year. And we're highlighting and celebrating the journey. We've been very fortunate to have Gina White write several articles all through last year. You may have seen those posted in the Davie County Enterprise. We also had some posted on EdNC in the journal publications. We had them on social media. If you go to the Mebane Foundation's website, you can see all of those articles from over the last year, and we really have a lot of things to celebrate. Okay, this is the data chart that we were referring to earlier. If you look at K-3 data, here you'll see a 3-year comparison of MClass data for kindergarten through 3rd grade. We've been very pleased with the incremental growth, especially looking at the results for the first year of Davie Leeds implementation in 2018. Here's where you can also see that cohort data, which is color-coded diagonally. You can see the typical drop from kindergarten to 1st grade. That's where the written component comes in that we were talking about earlier. But then they start to see growth again as they move into 2nd and 3rd grade. And there where you look at the grade level comparison from 2017 to 2018, you can see that incremental growth. +4, +5, +3, and +4. And then you can see the cohort comparison that we were referring to earlier. You see the drop when they move from kindergarten to 1st grade. Again, that written component comes into place, but then you see growth again.
I have to say here that, again, if you think back to the data slide that Dr. Hartness shared at the previous board meeting related to strategic planning, we were prepared to see an implementation dip. Oftentimes, when there are changes, we see test data drop, we see scores drop. So to actually see incremental growth is really exciting in year 1.
Well, I think the difference in that is that this program is grassroots. It's planned by the teachers and by private. It is not handed down to us, but you have addressed the needs of our community and our children. So I think that's why you see the growth, that it is there. And I think it's the only time Dial has been around. I think it's the only test that's been around for as long as I have.
looking again at Goal 2, remembering that we want to raise third grade proficiency from 60% to 80%, as we were talking about earlier. So if we look at end of grade test data for this past year, we're already making gains. We've gone from 60% to 64% with a 4% gain. So again, if you average that for 5 years, we will make that 20%.
This slide just provides an overview of the budget. This will allow you to look across the years at the investment as well as looking at each individual year. So in year one, in 2017-18, we've invested over $600,000 between the actual initiative and then the money that Mebane put into the Read to Achieve summer camp that we've already reported on tonight. If you track this across and consider the investment in summer camp as well as the initiative over 5 years, we're pushing a $3 million investment. Again, we have to acknowledge how blessed and how fortunate we are to have the Mebane Foundation as our partner. So as we look ahead into year two, already starting year two, several things that we'll point out here. First of all, we hope to begin working with Head Start as a new NC Pre-K center, helping them align curriculum and assessments with some professional development involved there. We want to invest in digital learning and assessments. Peggy and her team have piloted the cognitive toy box. That's difficult to say. And so that's something that they will expand upon this year. We will plan collaborative PLCs for private and public facilities, continue to coordinate professional development, the visits, the tours, and the coaching that they've already talked about. Building partnership with Smart Start Parents as Teachers program will help us reach children who are not in preschool programs. And then investing in Letterland kits and training for religious facilities who are eager to get their hands on that. At the K-3 end of the spectrum, we want to continue the PLC support and professional development there as we strengthen our PLCs. We will focus this year more on common assessments and analyzing that data, whereas this previous year, we really focused on clarifying standards. We want to focus on guided reading training and coaching and support involved with guided reading training. We want to provide Letterland coaching and support and training anyone who's new to Davie County Schools and hasn't been trained in Letterland, or anyone new to the grade level who's maybe moved from grades 3 through 5. We want to provide Hill Wrap training for additional teachers and TAs, organize reading research to classroom practice training. This is a partnership actually with our EC department. This used to be called Reading Foundations. And then we want to continue to update and enhance our media centers. So questions at this point? Biting off a lot, but in small, one year at a time, chunks.
That was going to be my comment. It's a lot. It's a lot, and it's going on everywhere. But thank you for the vision, looking forward, and pushing each other out of their comfort zones. It's good. Any other questions? Thank you very much. I think you guys are off the hook for a little bit. At this point, I welcome John Marshall up to talk about the STEM Pipeline Camp.
Good evening. How's everybody this evening? Chairman Junker, Dr. Hartness, members of the board, guests. I'm real excited to kind of present the STEM Pipeline Camp this year. This is near and dear to my heart. It's one of those programs that we started 6 years ago, so we're in our sixth. We had our sixth summer this past year for rising 7th and 8th graders across the district. The host this year was Davie County High School. It was the first year that we brought the camp to Davie High, and it brought on its excitement and kids being able to access technology and a facility that has never been used before for this program. This camp ran June 18th through the 29th for 29 7th graders and 9 8th graders. It's been our largest group thus far. and we continue to meet more and more needs of our students that are working to try and improve STEM in their lives. The first week of camp, students explored geothermal energy, which led to a number of labs and what we call goose chases or scavenger hunts. And the amazing thing was at the end of that week, it was the first time we were able to use the Google Expeditions. We didn't actually do a field trip this year. We actually did a virtual field trip. So you'll see pictures up there of, and I draw your attention to the one young lady at the bottom right-hand corner who I think almost fell out of her chair when a volcano exploded because it felt as if they were right there with that volcano. So that was an amazing experience. And then in week 2, we explored physics and roller coasters, and our students actually got to design their own roller coasters. And through that process, they had to create a roller coaster that allowed for either the longest ride, the most G-force, the greatest velocity, the most inverts, I think was the biggest challenge for them, where they took a marble and they designed their roller coaster, and it had to get all the way to the end. So it was an amazing experience. We have 3 great teachers, Kathy Melius and Colin Farabee from the high school, and then Emily Fanning from South Davie work in that camp. And then throughout the 2 weeks, the thing to me that jumps out the most is those soft skills those kids learn, right? The collaboration, the critical thinking, practicing those 21st century skills, and creating high quality products. And you can see that kind of on that left-hand side there. They have to present each week to their parents and to their peers. So that's our 2018 STEM Pipeline Camp in a nutshell. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, next item on the agenda is the CTE externship report with Anthony Davis.
All right. Chairman Junker, Dr. Hartness, members of the board, guests, had the wonderful opportunity, if we can get down to there it is, had the wonderful opportunity, and tonight you've heard a lot about our partnerships with the community, and this is a continuation of that. We had the opportunity this summer to participate in externships, and this is something that's funded by the Mebane Foundation, and in coordination with our Economic Development Council, Terry Brawley specifically. It's part of their 5-year economic plan. And it's a way to get teachers into businesses, to our local businesses. Now, quite honestly, when I took this on, I really didn't know what I was doing. That's just to be very honest with you. And so I decided to kind of change the way it had been done in the past and expand it a little bit to more businesses and more teachers being involved. And by doing that, I think we were able to get the word out there, because one of the issues that we have is getting the information from the businesses to the teachers, to the students, and to the parents. And we're wanting to figure out ways to streamline that and to make sure that the word does get out. And Gina White did a great article, and I think you have a link to that article. I do encourage you to read it. It was a great article that she did, and really did a good job of explaining what all we did. We had 9 businesses that were involved, 6 different staff members, including myself, from Davie County Schools, plus a member of the staff at DCCC was involved in this. And I'm going to tell you, it was just a great experience. We were able to get in there, and it's funny because a lot of the comments that the teachers had made was that here they worked right across from some of these businesses for all these years, and they had no idea what the business had done. They had no idea what they produced. They had no idea that they were even there. We had one teacher that said, I worked right across from them for 7 years and had no idea that it was sitting there. You know, so it's that these businesses are in our community, and it's just what do they do, and how can we help our students become employable to those businesses regardless of what educational background they come from. It can be someone graduating from high school, 2-year degree, or a 4-year degree. The fact is we have opportunities for them in Davie County, and we want those students, regardless of where they go, to come back here and be employable in our community. Several of the businesses told us that they can't find enough workers. They're having a shortage on being able to find people to employ. So we want to be able to help fill that gap, again, regardless of what educational background they come from. So we had a great time. The businesses were wonderful to deal with. We're going to hopefully expand it even more next year to more businesses that will want to get involved. Hopefully, we had such a great experience with the businesses that were involved that they'll talk to other businesses and we can get more people on board here. But it was a great opportunity to get out there, find out what these businesses were doing, and the fact that we could get in there and to tell our students, hey, here's an opportunity for you. We want to be able to have that open communication because right now the businesses are wanting to talk to us and we're definitely wanting to collaborate with them. So I do encourage you to read the great article that Gina had written, and it was really, really good. Any questions? Thank you.
Questions? Great, I love it. Let's see, next item, accountability and student information, and Ms. Erin Foyle.
Good evening, board members, Dr. Hartness, community members. It's nice to see you tonight, and it's nice to bring you the 2017-18 accountability results. So we're going to go through this tonight, and we're going to learn all about a new accountability model that came into play in 2017-18. So that model is the Every Student Succeeds Act, which is also not easy to say. But on December 10th, 2015, President Barack Obama signed into law the Every Student Succeeds Act. On September 18th, 2017, the state of North Carolina sent in their plan for the first time, several back and forth, a lot of feedback from the federal government. And then on June 5th, 2018, it was approved. So that wasn't very long ago. So we got into place all of the business rules and all of the things for how we look at our data that actually occurred at the end of 2018, right about the time the tests were being taken, right about the time it was approved. So as we look at the Every Student Succeeds Act, let's talk about the things that are familiar about it, and there are some things that are not familiar about it. So one of the familiar things is school performance grades. School performance grades we've had before. We've had these for a couple of different years. The state did modify them somewhat to fit in with the federal government rules and regulations for how our accountability model needed to look. So they changed that just a little bit. Because of that, I'll talk about this several times tonight, but there are some things that we can compare to previous years, and there are some things we can't compare to previous years because they did change how certain things are calculated. So the school performance grades are one of those things. It also added in long-term goals. So long-term goals are long-term, 10 years. So it's 10 years worth of goals. They are individualized per school this time. So back before when we had the annual measurable objectives and we were going forward, it was kind of a one-size-fits-all. This one is really individualized. Every school has their own set of goals over the next 10 years, depending on where they started out in 15-16. So we'll learn a little bit more about those. The Every Student Succeeds Act also includes English learner progress. So for the first time, we're really looking at how our students that are classified as English learners are progressing on the annual English proficiency test that they take, which for us is the access test that's done by WIDA. We look at how they do from year to year and how they progress towards exiting the English learner status. So that is also included in the accountability model. It's included now in the school performance grades, and there are long-term goals for that. So let's look at our school performance grades for just a minute. They really contain a lot of the same indicators that they contained before. Elementary and middle schools, we're looking at our English and our math EOGs along with our science EOGs. We're looking at those 8th grade Math 1 scores that our kids are taking. Then you see in that added English learner progress. So that's added into that green part right there. Then you go down to yellow, and you've got student growth. And the growth is for reading, for math, and for science. When you look at the high school, they have a lot more indicators that we can look at. So again, you're looking at your math and your reading and your science assessments, but you're also looking at graduation rate. you're looking at math course rigor, which is simply the number of 12th graders that have passed Math 3. And you're also looking at college readiness, so passing the ACT, meeting some benchmarks for the ACT, and meeting some benchmarks for the ACT work keys that our CTE concentrators take. So that's our high school indicators, and then when you look down in the yellow part, it takes into account student growth for reading and for math for high school. So when you put all that stuff together, then you've got the green part is worth 80% of the final school performance grade, and then you've got your yellow, which is the growth part, and that's worth 20%. So that's how they figure all those things out. They put all that stuff together, and they have come up with a formula, and then we get our school performance grades. Now, of course, with new accountability means new rules. So we have some new business rules that are applied to these things. Our participation is not a new rule. We've had to test 95% of our kids for a very long time. However, starting in 17-18, if you don't test 95% of your students, there are now consequences for that. So if you don't test 95%, they actually lower your proficiency ratings down to if those students had taken it and not passed it. So your participation really can impact. All of our schools met the 95% participation rate, and we typically have. There's really not ever been an issue in this district with participation. But across the state, if you don't meet that rate, then there are consequences for that. Another new rule is partial enrollment. So partial enrollment, previous to now, when we've looked at a lot of our scores, we have just counted everybody. In school performance grades before, it was everybody who took the test. Now, as in previous accountability models, we do have partial enrollment. So students have to be enrolled at least half of a school year in order to count in that school performance grade. So last year, when we calculated our school performance grades, we didn't have that rule. That's one of the reasons that we can't really compare previous years to this year. Next part, also not new, you'll be familiar with subgroups. This is a breakdown of all of the different students that take our test. So it breaks them down into racial groups. It also breaks them down into economically disadvantaged. Students are classified as English learners, students with disabilities. So we have all of those different groups that we look at to make sure there's not big gaps between them, and that's why they break them down that way. In order for a school to get information about a subgroup, we have to have at least 30 data points. So as we're going through, you'll see that sometimes we have targets, we have some goals, we see some stuff about certain subgroups but not others. Typically, when you don't see another one, it's because we don't have those 30 data points that allow us to report on them. So you see that subgroups N equals 30. Also new this year is we will get a school performance grade for every subgroup. We've not gotten that before. It will look at the exact same measures as it did for the overall group, but we'll get them for each subgroup. We will not get those until October. They're going to be presented at the State Board of Education October meeting. So we'll see those then. So for school performance grades for 17-18, we had one school that was an A school. We had 3 schools that were B schools and 7 schools that were C schools. And again, this is 80% what we call proficiency. So either EL learners making progress or people being proficient, making a 3, 4, or 5 on an end of course, end of grade test. The graduation rate is included in there and those other indicators. So they take that and then 20% growth. And these are our results for 17-18. All right, as we look at growth, we'll look a little bit more at proficiency in just a minute, but let's look at our growth. Growth is looked at through SAS. SAS is the company, and they make a software, and it's called EVOS. And it looks at students, and it figures out if they've progressed in a year about what their peers have. And if they have, then they've met growth. If they didn't learn that much in a year, then they have not met growth, and if they learn more, then they've exceeded growth. So it aggregates all of that information up into an entire school level designation. And so when you look at our designation for 17-18, we had 3 schools that did not meet growth. We had 3 schools that met growth, and we had 5 schools that exceeded growth. So we had 5 schools in our district whose students learned more than their peers across the state. Long-term goals. This is a new section of the accountability model, the Every Student Succeeds Act. The purpose of long-term goals, I really like this picture because it really describes what the purpose is. The purpose of long-term goals is that over time, everybody gets better. But over time, you're also reducing the achievement gap that you see in some of those lines. So you see the lower lines, like the very bottom line is students with disabilities. This is actually state data here. It's really just for example. But you see the bottom line, students with disabilities, and the next one up is economically disadvantaged. The very top one there is your white. And so this is all the way across the state what the data looks like. And so you can see if every school meets their goals over the next 10 years, that everybody moves up, but also that that achievement gap gets smaller. And so that's the point of those long-term goals. And one of the things that I personally really pushed for when the state went through a very long input session, and one of the things I felt very strongly about was that every school should have their own individualized goals. That makes all the goals relevant and challenging for every school, instead of having some that some schools can very easily meet and some that some schools will never meet. So if all the schools across the state meet their goals, this is what the data will look like in 10 years.
Aaron, before you move farther, are you saying that a few minutes ago you said that the state's going to give us an SPG or school performance grade for each of these subgroups?
Yes, they will.
Is that going to be based on the 80-20, the same?
It will.
So the state is going to give a letter grade to students with disabilities?
Yes, they will. And you will see that in schools that have at least 30 data points. So if you look at our long-term goals, we did have our baseline set by 15-16 data. And as we look at what our number of targets that were met, the way I kind of approached this was, let's look at the total number of targets we have. Let's look at the percentage of them that we met. And then let's look at how the state did and kind of compare us to that. So total targets, we met 47.2% of our targets for 2017-18. The state met 33% of their targets. And as you go forward, you'll see we are higher than the state. White is very close, so white we met 40.9%, and the state met 40%. But what I found very interesting about looking at our data is that when you look at the black subgroup, the economically disadvantaged subgroup, and the students with disabilities subgroup, we met 50%, 47.6%, and 63.2% of our targets for those, and the state met 0. And so if that tells you anything about, some of the specialized programs that we have and how we're doing as far as trying to improve our students and as we go forward, it will be interesting to see how that goes. Yes, sir.
Go back to that chart.
I can't.
I don't know how you draw it out, but what would be really neat for me and maybe other people as well is if we can have an overlay of that chart for that year with the next year over top of it to see if we're reaching goals at similar percentages, better than the state or equal to or less than. Just to me, that would be neat to see how it changes from one year to the next.
Okay, thank you for that input. All right, I'm going to move away from long-term goals and into cohort graduation rate. This is the number of students who enter 9th grade 4 years ago, and then they graduate in 4 years. So you'll see here, our line is the green line, and the state line is the blue line. So you'll see a little bit more variation in our line. We do have a smaller sample size than the state does, so that's typical. And you'll see that we, at the top there, have held steady. So we've been at 87.3% for the past 3 years, and we were at 87.3% again for the 2017-18 school year. The state did end up at 86.3%, down just a little bit from 86.5% the previous year. All right, so let's look a little bit at some comparison data from 2016-17 to 2017-18. Unlike school performance grades, where we did some different business calculations and we can't really compare this year to previous years, we can still compare our proficiencies. Proficiencies didn't change. This is still really everybody that took the test. And they do report those numbers out. So for comparison purposes, I do like to bring those up. We are going to look at grade level proficiency. Whenever we have a test, the students can receive a level 1 up to a level 5. Levels 4 and 5 are considered college and career ready. That's actually what's used in the long-term goals to look at. And then GLP is your grade level proficiency. That's levels 3, 4, and 5. And so we're going to look at grade level proficiency tonight. And we're going to look at first the performance composite. The performance composite is just all the tests that we take all put in the same bucket. So it's all the EOCs, all the EOGs, all kind of put in the same bucket here. And you'll see that in 2016-17, again, we're the green bar and the state is the blue bar. So in 2016-17, we were at 63.9%. In 2017, we were at 62.5%. The state also mirrored that trend at 59.2% in 16-17 and 58.8% in 2017-18. A couple of more numbers to look at. If we look at math overall, we were 62%, so this is all grades 3 through 8, 62% in 16-17, 60.3% in 17-18, so down a little bit. And the state was up just a little bit from 55.4% to 56.1%. You see our reading really held steady. It's not really statistically significant, the difference between 61.8 and 61.4. And then North Carolina 57.5 and went down just a little bit to 57.3. A little about high school scores here. In 16-17, grades 9 through 12 are all the EOCs that we take at the high school level. This year, it did include banked scores from ninth graders who had taken Math 1 in the middle school level, but that will not be the case going forward. But this year, it did include them. Grades 9 through 12, 62.7% in 16-17 and 58.5% in 17-18. The state also dropped 60.8% in 16-17 and 58.5% in 16-17, and then in 17-18, 58.5%. The ACT composite is another thing that we look at. These are the percentage of students that made a composite score of 17 or higher. That is the lowest composite score that a University of North Carolina school will accept for admittance. So we had 68% of our students in 2016-17 that made that benchmark, 66.2% in 17-18. Across the state in 16-17, you'll see 58.8% and then 57.9%. So we're seeing some trends that are mirrored across the state. We do have a couple of celebrations that I wanted to bring out. Yes, sir, go ahead.
I really don't want to sound like the negative Nelly in the room, but I don't hear any moaning or groaning or anything, and maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but it seems to me that in grades 9 through 12, and I can't read those numbers from here, I see that the green line last year was greater than the state average. Yay, Davie County, better than the state. And in the second column, this past year, from here, it looks real close to the same height as a state?
It is exactly the same height,
Is
yes.
it? Okay.
Mhm.
And then you flip over to ACT. That is a test that all juniors take. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And I don't know exactly what the test is supposed to be measuring, but in Davie County, our juniors did better, significantly better than juniors across state average. Is that correct?
That is
Am I using the
correct.
right words?
Mhm.
Well, that sounds good. We're better than the state average.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the number at the top of the first green column when you're looking at it, 16, 17? What is that number up there?
68, for Davie County, you mean?
Okay, tell me what that
And the second one's 66.2.
grade level proficiency, 60, how many?
66.2.
I don't know what you subtract that from 100, what do you get? That's the
43.
number of people that were not proficient in grades 8 through, or 9 through 12.
Well, and I may have mislabeled the slides somewhat. Grade level proficiency is really dealing with the grades 9 through 12. When we get to ACT composite, that's the percentage of students that made that 17. So that's the composite score of 17. And that's that benchmark that says a college will take me, the University of North Carolina system will take me if I have made at least that. So, or that is the minimum they will take. So when you look at that, I don't want to, split hairs or anything, but it's not really grade level proficiency, okay? That's really more college and career ready as far as those percentages go. But you're right. I mean, as far as it has gone down, we see a trend down, not only across the state, but here in the district. And that is something that we're looking at and we're concerned about. And, we're really looking in, trying to dig into ways that we can change things to make that better.
Aaron, I would point out too, when you look at the two columns that are under grades 9, 12, that's 3 end-of-course tests.
It is.
English 1, or English 2
English
rather,
2.
biology and math 1. So there's a lot of other courses we teach at the high school level besides those 3 courses. And when you look at that for 17, 18, it shows that our students in grades 9, 12 in those 3 courses were flat even with the state. So those are assessments developed by the state of North Carolina. You look over to the right is the ACT, which is developed by a college board. It's a college readiness assessment that's given to all 11th graders. So from that data set, we can see that last year, 68% of our students who took that test at the end of their junior year met the minimum requirements to go to college in North Carolina, even before their senior year, whereas this year it was 66.2. Look at the difference in our students in the state there and the difference in our students in the state on the state developed test. Why would you not see the same percentage of students that are ready in both categories? It just highlights the differences. When you use different assessments, you get different percentages of proficiency. So I think there's a lot that you can gather from this slide right here when you consider how our students are prepared for college and for life.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I do have a couple of celebrations that I wanted to bring up as far as growth goes. I told you before that we had 5 schools that exceeded growth. We had a couple of schools that really did a magnificent job when it comes to growth. So we had one school who their math growth was better than 92% of all middle schools. And North Davie Middle School, their math growth was high enough to be in the top 8% in the state. So help me congratulate them. We also had an elementary school whose overall growth actually put them in the top 4% of all elementary schools. So their growth was better than 96% of the elementary schools in the state. And if you will, help me congratulate Coolamy Elementary School. There are lots of other great highlights. I had to pick a couple because I've been up here long enough as it is. But I did really want to point out those 2 things because when you're that high up there in the state, then that's really a magnificent job.
Aaron, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Do you have any idea what the estimated number of middle schools there are in North Carolina?
662 in that one.
662. So in the top 8%, that's pretty significant. I think there's over 1,200 elementary schools.
1218.
And they're in the top 50 in there, so,
That's correct.
yeah.
That's correct.
Roughly.
I did also want to talk, this has already been presented a little bit too, but I did want to talk about our grade 3 reading. I was very excited to look because we've put so much focus on this, and you've heard the presentations and how much work has gone into our early grades, and to see results is very rewarding. So I did want to point out that in 16-17, we were at 59.6%, almost 60% proficient. In 17-18, we are at 63.7%. In the same year where the state actually went down a little bit from 57.8% to 55.9% in grade 3 reading. So I did want to bring that up also as a celebration because it is very significant considering the work and the time and the money and the collaboration that has been put into that particular grade level and achieving those results. All right, that is the end of the accountability part of the presentation. Are there any questions that you have beyond, we've had a nice discussion the entire time, but do you have any other questions?
Any questions?
Right. I do have one other slide here for enrollment numbers. And so I'm going to present the 10-day enrollment. Yesterday was our, well, that did rank us 17 out of 115 LEAs. I forgot about that part, for our grade 3 reading. If we go look at our enrollment numbers for our 10 days, I have a lot of numbers up here. I'm just going to draw some of them to your attention, not all of them. We don't have to read through all of them. But if you'll look, you'll see a couple of schools that had some change. Really, we are very, very flat. But Coolumee was up 1%, Shady Grove down 6%, and William R. Davie up 2% as far as numbers go. Again, very, very flat as far as elementary school totals. For middle schools, we did have some variation there, but still pretty flat overall. North Davie is up 8%, South Davie down 6%, and William Ellis down 4%. And for high school, Davie County High School is up 2% from last year. So that gives us a total at our 10-day number of 6,128 students that are enrolled. And kind of a big picture view over there is your elementary schools are down 1%, middle schools down 1%, high schools up 2% for a grand total change of 0% from 17-18 to 18-19. So those are your 10-day enrollment numbers, and we will continue to monitor those and see those fluctuate over the next 9 months.
I have a quick question. I'm
Sure.
sorry to do this. What's Moxwell Elementary's number?
Now let's go back.
I apologize.
No, you're fine.
Okay,
So it went
568.
from 565
Okay.
to 568.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any questions?
Just is there some way that we could get a copy of that one slide sent to us? I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Next item is the Child Nutrition Summer Feeding Program. George Selecki.
Good evening, board members, Chairman Junker, Dr. Hartness, and staff. I'm just going to take a moment of your time this evening to update you on yet another successful summer for the Child Nutrition Department had operating USDA's Summer Feeding Service Program here in Davie County. All right, before I get into the good stuff, the numbers for this year's program, I would like to reiterate what I said last year at this time. This program is a twofold blessing for my department. First and foremost, it's a blessing to the kids of Davie County that we reach out to and feed during the summer. Statistics on food insecurity haven't changed. In fact, they remain the same. There are 1 in 5 children in North Carolina that are food insecure on a daily basis. So when school comes to an end in August and summer begins, many kids that counted on our school meals for their daily nourishment during the school year begin to feel the insecurity of where their next meal will come from or what their next meal might even consist of. That is why we operate this program. We want to be that stopgap, and we have been that stopgap for the past 3 years when school lets out for the summer up until school starts back in the fall. Second, this program allows me the ability to provide year-round employment to my employees that are dedicated to making a difference in the child's life during the summer months. So essentially, this is a win-win situation for my staff as well as the children of Davie County. Now for the good stuff, the numbers. This year's summer feeding program started on June 18th and ended on August 10th for a total of 39 operating days. A total of 26 feeding sites were available to children up to the ages of 18 throughout the county. Sites were located in Coolamy, Moxville, Farmington, and Canancer. Finally, our department employed 16 employees who were responsible for serving 7,147 breakfast meals and 16,433 lunch meals for a combined total of 23,580 meals over 39 days. If you do the math, which I did, that's 605 meals a day served to children in need. Quite an accomplishment, and needless to say, I'm very proud of my department and what they were able to accomplish this summer, and we look forward to doing it again next year. Thank you for your time.
Were adults able to come and pay for
Yes,
those?
they were.
Was that included in your numbers?
No, it's not.
Okay. Do you off the top of your head have any idea how many adults we served
I'm guessing around 100.
for the whole summer?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, sir. Next item on the agenda is a construction budget update, and Ms. Miller.
Thank you, Chairman Junker, members of the board, Dr. Hartness. We're getting close. We are still at 99% spent on the bond sale and the lottery funds that we used for building the new high school. We have approximately $327,000 remaining to spend. But encumbered, that's correct. Do you have any questions on that at this time? Okay. Thank you.
Any questions? All right, thank you. And last, but certainly not least, Mr. Michael Spillman with Field House Update.
Chairman Junker, board, Dr. Hart, and staff, I will try to keep this under 45 minutes because I have not had dinner yet. It's going to bounce off the coast. We don't have to worry about that. All right, I have a couple of things to present. First, we're going to start off with the field house update. Things are really moving along out there very quickly. As you can see right here, we're going to go back in time because there's a lot of growth in the last month. If you have ridden by there, so here we are. They're setting steel and steel laying block here in this photo, and here they have sprayed the entire block with foam insulation to help weather tight the building. And I know that's glamorous and really looks good. So here we go. And as you can see, they've started setting the trusses here. And that took a couple of days. They've started laying the brick fascia here. At the same time, they were actually doing the trusses. And you can see the steel on the ends. They have set that on both ends here. And here's the trusses from inside the building. And as you can see, we've got several different looks of that. And there's the crane on the lower end there, setting the trusses. And here we are with the sheeting on there. And they're finishing up the brickwork here at this photo. And there's Dr. Hartness with his hands in his pocket. And as they're putting the roof on.
He was wondering how he was going to pay for that.
And so there's the last little brick that they had to lay, and then they have, like I said, they have washed the brick, and it looks pretty good. And they're in the process of they've sprayed the foam insulation underneath the roof, and you can see ductwork going in. They've been doing a lot of the wire pulling and the rough in electrical, rough in HVAC. There's the pad for the main HVAC unit there on the ground. There's the HVAC unit. That is Energy United Propane, running the propane lines to operate the dryer, the water heater, and plus the outdoor HVAC unit. All the doors have been installed. They have started priming the interior walls. I had a conversation today about the paint colors and make sure everybody was on the same page with that. And let me back up a little bit. Then they are going to do they're going to pour the concrete for the transformer pad tomorrow. All the gas lines are run. They're going to set a propane tank beside the transformer right on the outside of the fence towards the school, and we will fence that off too. The sewer, water, and storm drains have been installed. I believe they finished it up today. So do you have any questions about the field house renovation or the construction?
Still hoping for the end of the month.
Still hoping for the end of the month. Weather's been a challenge. It has rained there when it's not rained anywhere else, believe it or not. So it is, like I said, as you can tell, there's been a lot of water on that. But the site drains very well. And so they were hoping to get the outside concrete and all poured before the rain, but they're not going to because of the site work and the sewer lines and stuff. So now I was asked any more questions. Now I want to touch base with you a little bit in the theater. We installed the wall between the black box and the theater over the summer. And I'd like to start by Brad Lagle worked with us on finishing the steel work to support the wall on each end. And he worked with us very closely, being he set the steel on the entire school. So, and they're cutting out the bottom of the soffit to put the track in there. And as you can see in those pictures right there, they were working on both ends. They were really under a tight schedule to get it finished. And let's see back up here. I don't know if you can see that very well, but they had to cut out the very bottom all the way through. Then they had to cut out sections on each side so they could fasten the track up in the wall. And then they had to come back and sheetrock it all back in. And here they are setting the walls. 2 guys set these walls, and it was not their first time setting them. But I will say they were very heavy, and it took a few days.
Is that Mr. Nicholson
That
with his
is
hands
Mr.
in his pocket?
With his hand in his pocket, too. So,
It's interesting how you always get everybody with hands in their pocket.
Nothing like a good supervisor, Dole.
So here you are. You got the interior wall on this side. That's the classroom side. And then this shows both sides in one photo. It's really, if you have not seen it, it's really a big wall, to be honest with you. And so, and as you can tell, it folds back into the pockets on each side. But that's what it looks like from the stage. So it really turned out very, very nice. So do you have any questions about the Davie High School petition?
I would just point out, this is one of those items that we value engineered out of the project, not knowing if we'd have enough money at the end. So we are going back and we've added this back. This is a feature that our staff really wanted, to make that black box area in the back of the auditorium more flexible so that they could close that off when we were not having large events, or they could open it up and have seating for 750 people. So, Michael, thank you for building that wall.
You're welcome. Do we have any more questions?
I would just make a comment. I would warn anybody with their hands in their pockets, stay away from Michael when he has a camera.
Y'all have a good evening.
I think we're losing control. Next item on the agenda is our adjournment, if there's no comments from the board. You sure? Last thing I would say, we've got a motion, we have a second, is just everybody be careful with the storms coming, and everyone be in our prayers. All those in favor? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you very much.